Welcome to this edition of C-Band's Member Spotlight. I'm Curtis Dean with C-Band, and today are shining the spotlight on one of our newer associate members of C-Band, the folks at Vivacity Networks. And I'm really tickled to have Jeff Parris on for our conversation today. Jeff, thanks for getting on with me and talking about Vivacity.
Yeah, my pleasure. Obviously, we're members for a reason. We think very highly of the work C-Band's doing, and we're just excited to be part of the solution that we're trying to solve here and create opportunities for people. And so glad to be here, Curtis.
We had a great opportunity to hang out a little bit here in the Detroit area a few weeks ago during the Merit Conference in Detroit, Michigan, and great to chat with you there and kind of started the brainstorming about we need to get this member spotlight scheduled because people need to hear what you guys are doing. And our main job at C-Band is to bring people together and make those introductions to people who have problems and people who help solve problems. So, as a problem solver, maybe talk a little bit about what, your role is at Vivacity and how you arrived at this destination for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the Senior Vice President of the sales organization for Vivacity Infrastructure Group and spent really most of my career in telecommunications. About half of it was in the wireless side. Back in I'm going to date myself here now, but back in the early to mid 90s when I got out of school and worked for a number of wireless carriers. Well, actually, a couple kind of rural wireless carriers that were bought and sold and part of that consolidation process. And then spent the second half of my career working on, I'm going to use an older term here, the landline industry, right? Spent some time in some executive roles for telephone and data systems and CenturyLink before it was acquired by Level 3. And then I moved to the professional services design and build side and so got a nice, robust background in terms of just, the direction and the trajectory we're moving as a country and as a region in terms of really closing this digital divide and, trying to bring broadband infrastructure and access to so many different cities, towns, and people across this country. So
it really is an exciting time to be in the industry, especially when you're a solutions provider, because you get to get into the trenches and help solve these problems.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting. As you said, we're a very interesting time because, obviously, as we know, there was a period of time where, most of the expansion was driven by, private enterprise building out their network to serve customers. But, as we've gone through this pandemic, Curtis, and we've realized how big this digital chasm is, as we all know, the federal government and the NTIA and the different state governments have stepped up to, put our country's investment into broadband. And we've also seen a proliferation of, fiber overbuilders that are seeking to serve these different communities and towns as a alternative to some of the larger, more national players or large regional players. And, I think many of the communities across the U.S. are going to win as a result of that.
Right. And, as part of that, that wave of new broadband projects in fiber infrastructure, we've seen a lot of new public infrastructure, not only public investment by, say, the federal government or states into networks, but more and more networks being owned by the public, by the citizens of a given area. So that's been a big area where Vivacity has focused your attention, hasn't it been?
Yeah, it has. We design, project manage, and build fiber networks, right? And sometimes that's a middle mile network. Sometimes that's a last mile network. We count as customers, a lot of our customers, and I'll call it a niche is working with counties and cities that are looking to kind of take control of their, broadband infrastructure, attract investment, make sure their citizens and towns are connected. And so we've worked on a lot of interesting projects that, as you know, and the different members of C-Band require a lot of collaboration, a lot of co-problem solving, and really building bridges on how do we develop a solution that works for this community or this set of stakeholders and really addresses some of the some of the issues that the lack of broadband has. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've taken a lot of pride in working very closely on public infrastructure and finding solutions that work for those communities, and also bridge gaps between public and private.
Absolutely. I put your website up here because we want people to see how to get to you. What are some of the projects that you've been involved with that when you look back on it, you say, wow, that was a real win for that community. That was a win for us, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We have a project in Michigan I'll use as one of a handful of examples. That's a county called Livingston County. And, they have several towns within that particular county that I'll call are a bit underserved by, the broadband carriers in those areas. And they've got a real thought leader and visionary in their CIO, a gentleman by the Chris Toby, who said, hey, I want to solve for this, and I want to attract investment, and I want to serve my county needs. And so we collaborated very closely with him and, as well as the school district within that county, entity called LISA. And we got to the table with Livingston County and the school district, and they were the recipients of, some ARPA funding that they wanted to really put to work to build infrastructure throughout the county that would close gap on some of the broadband inefficiencies that exist in that county. And, that takes a village. I know it's a cliche, but, it's not only matching up the needs of the county and matching up the needs of the school district, but also building that coalition within, the county commissioners and the governing bodies. And it's a process of education and looking at it through a lens of, design build, but also what kind of economic development investment might it attract, and how does it really solve the problem of closing the broadband gap and chasm in these communities that are underserved. And so we've spent a lot of time working with that group on, a very specific plan around addressing all those things, and really, I'm going to say modernizing. I always hate to use the word future-proofing, but certainly.
We aren't
very much future ready, right?
Future.
And so we that project is underway, and it's brought a lot of visibility to that community, and it's solving a lot of its problems. And I think it starts with having the right motivation, as an organization to solve the problem, and usually other things sort of fall in place.
It's actually, I've always talked to communities about this. When you are starting an exploration of how to solve broadband problems, it's really important to understand and get a grasp of what your goal is, what the win looks like for your community. And you mentioned Livingston County, their goal, their win was just to get better broadband to their citizens and control the infrastructure, or at least portions of the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So that was their win, and they put together a plan working with you guys and working, I think it was adc.net up there, that to do that.
They're certainly in Michigan. Yeah, they're an internet service provider in Michigan, and there's other ones certainly that are more local and regional to Michigan. So, and I think their middle mile infrastructure is owned, as you say, by the county, and I'll call it open access. And I know open access can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, it's something that would be accessible by varying private entities that are interested. And again, how does it attract investment and serve the people, give the county some control over their destiny, and also help address the county needs. Counties are important governing bodies that provide a lot of different services for the citizens of the different villages and towns and cities within those counties. And so that's all part of the solution. And how do you think long term, right? For in the best interests of all the stakeholders in your particular area.
Absolutely. So as you're looking at, I'm not going to ask you as a crystal ball, because you mentioned not saying future proof, because I'm very much future resistant is maybe a better way to describe why fiber networks are what they are right now. And certainly they're needed for so many other methods of connectivity, from wireless to smart grid to all of these things. But you're looking at we got a lot going on in this industry right now. BEAD funding will be hitting the streets sometime, we think, in the next few months, maybe. You're going to have new projects being built. You're going to have new, probably new providers that come out of the woodwork to do these new projects. What do you see as the real challenges now with all of us in the broadband industry here, not only with getting into BEAD, but also whatever's next after BEAD?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think the disbursement programs historically have taken longer to allocate than I think we all would like. And so I think as much as we want BEAD to be here as soon as possible, it's going to take different states, different intervals to kind of get there in terms of getting those applications approved and awarded. So I think, time is always something that it takes a little bit longer than we'd all like. But, and then of course, I'm not sure, it's going to take not just BEAD money to solve the problem, right? It's going to take investment from the private side, working with the public side to get the kind of ubiquity I think we want throughout the country and in several of these different regions. And so I think, we've got to put compelling business cases together, working across the spectrum, whether it's a county, city, state, with the private communities to make sure these programs get addressed. So I think that's going to be very important. ACP recently didn't get renewed.
Right.
I was a little disappointed by that. I think it's an important program to subsidize folks that can't necessarily afford some of the entire stacks of services necessary to give them the kind of services they want. So I'd like to see that sort of be addressed as we push forward into the next 12 to 24 months. And then of course it's going to put some pressure on time and resources. There's only so many contractors and supply chain folks that can drive that kind of growth. And so you want to do it in a way that, allows counties and cities and the private side to do it at the right sort of economic rates. And if demand outstrips supply, it certainly puts pressure on costs. And so I think we've got to find a way to, train more folks, get more folks into the industry on the supply side.
Right.
And then lastly, without being too long-winded, we got to make sure just because it's built and executed and delivered, we've got to make sure the folks that are going to use these services get the kind of education and equipment and training they need to make the greatest use of it, right? And I think a lot of times we think, well, it's really easy to how do you leverage broadband, but it's just not the truth. And I think there's digital training that's going to be an important part of this, and working with an ecosystem that can bring not only just bandwidth, but how do you bring vital services that people need over the broadband connectivity, whether it's telehealth, educational access, workforce development types of technologies. I think those will all be things we need to address. And I guess rather than challenges, opportunities, right?
Right.
Really, really make an advancement in the quality of life and the economic development that's necessary in these different communities that are going to be served by broadband.
One observation, I'll be curious to get your observation on this. In my years working with both public entities and private entities that are doing telecommunications, the two don't necessarily speak the same language, and sometimes that leads to, makes it harder for public entities and private entities to collaborate to solve problems. Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, the private entities, for the most part, historically, they've they've got a business model.
Mhm.
They've got, financial metrics tied to those business models. And sometimes those don't translate as well to build out some of the areas that need it.
Right.
But I do believe that there's this rising tide that can raise all ships when you do get them at the table speaking the same language, right?
Mhm.
And really trying to understand, how do you work together rather than against each other with regard to building out infrastructure to different communities that, enhance your brand, enhance your fidelity. If you're a private entity, they may not meet all the metrics you want, but how do you partner with those communities with regard to some of the subsidies that might be available,
Right.
and drive to a more holistic solution downstream. And I think it's getting the guard down, and it's building the right kinds of conversations with the private and public that can lead to those good conversations. But you need good faith. You need good faith from the
Oh,
private side, and
absolutely. Yeah.
obviously need good faith from the public side to make these things happen. And I think it again, as simplistic as it sounds, it's about open, transparent dialogue, and
Mhm.
bring that good faith spirit to the table.
Yeah, I think it's, public entities need to understand that business models have to be applied by private industry because they're not charities, they're not taxing authorities, et cetera. But on the other hand, private entities need to understand that public entities, they're they have a goal of protecting their communities, improving their communities, quality of life, infrastructure, et cetera. And that sometimes private entities need to maybe stretch that business model a little bit. We're seeing a lot of that stretching of the business model right now with the various funding rounds that are coming, have already been out and are coming. We're seeing private industry have to say, okay, I'm going to have to stretch my business model because even if I get a 70, 75, 80% subsidy on this area, I can't make it work in my current business model, even with my 20% contribution. So how do we stretch that? And I think that's where local communities, counties, townships, et cetera, can play an important role in helping those providers stretch their business model by providing them with value that will ease their burden, so to speak, whether it be
Absolutely, and
zoning,
yeah,
permitting,
I agree with you. And I don't to interrupt you, but you're right. They
yeah.
do got to stretch that model. I think you can't look at every capital project in a vacuum. What's the overall net impact in maybe the larger region for that private entity, and how does that collaboration maybe give a lift to the whole area, even though the financial stretch in a particular area is particularly painful? And then
Right.
how do you improve efficiency? Is there some permitting velocity that a public entity can provide? Are there some ways that they can augment and make that execution piece and that
Mhm.
investment piece a little bit easier for that private entity? And I think when they both bring, some open-mindedness and maybe some flexibility to the table, I think you end up finding good solutions.
I've
Um,
seen it work both ways where communities have been very flexible and helpful to incentivize a provider to say build in a specific area. But I've also seen it where communities throw up unnecessary roadblocks or see it as a way to monetize potential, permitting process, et cetera.
yeah,
I know that the C-band members that we've worked with over the years, we're always telling them, um, yes, this is a private company, but they're delivering a public good, and it's a good that your citizens, who you're responsible for, want and need. Therefore, anything you can do to help them get to yes, anything you can do
yeah,
is going to help that project. And by the way, I'll help you get reelected if you're an elected official.
yeah,
If you're
yeah.
the one that brought broadband to town against all odds, then people are going to remember that at the ballot box.
Absolutely. And again, on the private side, you've seen, like, you gotta be open and transparent. Let's not
Yeah.
obfuscate on what coverage really is in
Right.
certain areas. Let's,
Yes.
let's uh, bring a certain quality of service there. And so I repeat myself a bit, but I think when you bring that good faith sort of spirit to the negotiations, and the collaboration, you usually can find a solution that works.
Well, Jeff, I've always thought that a good point deserves repeating itself. So don't
Yeah,
be afraid to repeat yourself when it comes to this one about collaboration and openness. I think that's
yeah,
absolutely vital. Well, as we run down our time here, Jeff, I want to just give you an opportunity to maybe tell people how to get in touch with you and the Vivacity Network
sure.
group. I'm going to put your email up
You
there.
bet.
So now you're in trouble. You're going to get spammed.
Well, hey, we welcome anybody that might want some feedback, bounce some things off. I've been in the industry for most of my career. I've worked kind of both sides of the desk, in
Mhm.
terms of being on the carrier side. I know how they think and how they make decisions. Working on uh, professional services side and working on really bringing public-private partnerships together, I also realize what's important to communities, right? And so I encourage any of your members, even if it has nothing to do with the design, project management, build of a network, they're welcome to call me for any sort of insight or advice on, hey, how's a carrier thinking, or how did a particular community you worked with think about solving this challenge, and we can introduce folks and bring parties together and let you go. We don't necessarily have to be a part of it, but let you have a conversation about best practices and how to adapt and navigate certain challenges. Uh, we believe that when we can put these parties together and foster collaboration, it usually results in solutions. And sooner or
Mhm.
later, they like to get us potentially involved. And so I want to encourage your members for that. Obviously, we design project management and build networks. And so as you're kind of navigating that, we're happy to give you any kind of feedback or an opinion on it from that kind of, again, design and build perspective. And we maintain a nice relationship of different public organizations throughout
Right.
the Midwest and beyond. And so just the other day, I was introducing a particular city that's looking at doing a municipal build to
Right.
another city that was already in the throes of it and doing it. And, I think they're going to share some best practices and share some
Fantastic.
experiences. I think, lift each other up. And so we love to see that happen. So reach out to me via email. You're welcome to also call me. And I'm more than happy to put that into the C-band registry, however you want to handle that,
Yeah,
Curtis.
absolutely.
But we love to see infrastructure get built for
And I
communities.
always tell members too, I'm your relay guy. So if you miss this and you say, oh, I saw you had this guy on from Vivacity, how do I get a hold of him? Just reach out to me, and I can help take care of that. There's our email address, or our website address, I should say. My email is cdean@broadbandaction.com. But we always wanting to make those introductions. That's what we feel is the strongest. One of our strongest missions here at C-band is to get people talking to each other, because that's when problems get solved. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love the organization, love the work you guys are doing, and I think uh, it's important to close this digital divide. And so,
yeah,
kudos to you and C-band and all the work the organization's doing. We're glad to be a part of it.
and we're glad you're a part of it too, Jeff. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about what you do, your visions, and of what the industry is looking like, and offering your brain for occasional picking from our members. We do appreciate it, and
Yeah.
we hope you have a great rest of your summer.
Yes,
Our
you too, Curtis, and appreciate the time. So have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Our guest today on this
Okay.
edition of C-band's Member Spotlight has been Jeff Parris with the folks at Vivacity Networks. We'll talk to you next time here on our Member Spotlight.